So I wanted to make a video talking about this Variety article that was written by Tatiana Siegel and how it was all exposed to be lies or whatever. I'm not going to get... So if you don't know what this article is, this article came out. And it's an article that basically was about how... it basically was it was a multitude of stories about Marvel and their kind of fuck ups and things. Some of these which I believe, and then other ones that were like, what the fuck? I'm gonna go through the major ones and kind of leave the other ones out, I guess, that don't really matter. Basically, the first one was that Doctor Doom might be the next Marvel villain for this phase because they're worried about Jonathan Majors and his legal shit, and also they feel like the general audience maybe isn't connecting with Kang, which I will say I believe this one because, I mean, this is a pretty big legal case with Jonathan Majors. You should be worried about it, even if you are willing to stand by him and think he might be innocent. There's still a 50-50 chance that things might go south for you, and Disney kind of doesn't like that, and it's also they're probably getting pressure from higher ups. The other thing is, like, I do think that there's been this rumor about Marvel and how, like, supposedly Kevin Feige and the Marvel team were actually shocked when the Marvel fan base didn't really like Quantumania too much. And I think maybe that's just because that movie did get basically the Marvels wasn't moving as far along as they wanted it to, so they had to move up the release of Quantumania, and so maybe I think that some things kind of got lost in the shuffle because of that. So I kind of believe that. The other thing, though, that didn't make... This was the first sign. Okay, so this article, from what I understand, Tatiana Siegel is not a very good writer with these articles because apparently she's been exposed for kind of lying, making up horseshit, maybe doing stuff to stir up racial drama and blaming minorities, which is weird because she's a woman. It's kind of like when Candace Owens on the right starts talking, where she's like... She's someone that... Why would you stand for the right? Like, they fucking hate you and don't want you to exist, but yet you're defending the people that don't want you to... It's a whole thing. Like, that's how I feel about that. Like, I feel like that she's like that. Because apparently she's written hit pieces about Ray Fisher and stuff, and so the other story that kind of blew this whole thing up was what's going on with the Marvels. The Marvels has a very low projection for the box office, and I think that is a whole thing where the projection for that movie is low, and I think that's for a couple reasons, which is that I was telling my girlfriend the other day, we were on the phone, it was like, she kind of wanted to see it. I'm like, well, have you seen Miss Marvel? Have you seen WandaVision? Have you seen Secret Invasion? And she's like, no. Well, I said, well, you gotta watch all those things before you watch this one thing. And so it does make all that very complicated, right, for the general audience. I think that's one thing that's gonna hurt this movie. I don't know how much of those shows you really need to watch to understand this movie, but I do think that some of those will be necessary to understand this movie, right? So that's one problem. The other thing is I do not believe these box office projections are as low as they are because I think they're low right now, but I think that they're not taking into account one thing. So the week after is Thanksgiving break, or at least the start of it, and the Hunger Games prequel comes out. It's a 3-hour movie. It was like 2 hours and 45 minutes when I was looking on Fandango. I don't think there's any real excitement for this Hunger Games prequel at all. I don't think there's people who are really excited about it. I've never heard anyone talk about the prequel book. So the only other movies coming out during that time period are movies like Trolls or like Wish, right? These movies that are more appealing to families. And yes, the Marvel franchise is kind of something that appeals to families, but it's really not for families, if that makes sense, right? I feel like, there's a lot of 20-year-olds, teenagers who go to these Marvel movies, and they're going to want to go. That's just the way I see it. I think this movie will do better than people expect. I think sometimes these studios lowball projections so that way they can brag about them being higher than they expected. When really all along they knew that this movie was going to be a hit. I think it's a little silly that they're going about it like this. But yeah, one of the things that they were saying about this in this specific article though was that the director of this film, who I do not really know the name of, nor have I seen anything else that she's done. This might be her first film. I don't really know. She basically has not been involved with the movie as much, and she left during post-projection, which some directors actually pointed out, like, directors do that. Like, Steven Spielberg did that for some of his films. Like, some of his most famous films, he did that, so it's, like, what are we doing here? We're like criticizing somebody for doing this, but also I think she confirmed, or somebody confirmed, I forget exactly who, that this was not true, and she was there for that. So I'm just like, the fuck. Also, we know that Marvel fixes a lot of things in post. Like, a director not being there is kind of normal. Like, even Black Widow, there was I think it was reported that like the directors were not even hired before they started filming some action sequences or something like that. I don't know if that's exactly true, but I was hearing something to that effect or something. I could be misremembering that, but I remember hearing something about that, right? So I just like, don't take my word on that, but yeah, I was like, okay, well, like, this is kind of normal with this kind of shit. Like, even Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, we heard lots of stories from actors that they fixed a lot of stuff and they changed a lot of stuff. It's pretty normal for Marvel to do this. So I'm not really sure why all these people are being bitches and being like, whoa, Marvel's really failing. It's like, no, not really. It seems like she was kind of doing the woke shit, but then like the anti-woke shit, and then you go on to Blade, and Blade is like a whole thing of like, this is the first sign that I thought this article was bullshit, where the story was that Blade wouldn't be a lead in his own movie, and Marvel didn't like that, and that Marvel had a whole thing where he was gonna learn life lessons and he was gonna be like a third main character in his own movie, and it's like, well, I do think Marvel has kind of done that recently. Like, I feel like Captain Marvel isn't the main character in her own movie coming up. I feel like it's more Miss Marvel, Monica Rambeau. I feel like, some of the Doctor Strange didn't feel like the main character of his own movie. I feel like they have done that, but it's also like, those are a little bit different because we've actually seen those characters do things. Right, we've seen Captain Marvel's origin. We've seen Doctor Strange's origin. We kind of know those characters. I don't think they would do that with Blade. Doesn't really make sense at all. And it's also just like learning life lessons. Like, the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? Like, if you can't elaborate, maybe just leave that fucking part out. Like, I don't understand. And apparently, a lot of the Blade writers were like, we've never seen this draft that supposedly exists. Like, the fuck are you talking about? Also, like, I don't know the Blade comics very well, but are there a lot of female characters in, like, Blade comics that they could like, do that? Like, I think there is a female Blade, but I could be wrong about that. So it's just like, the fuck is she talking about? And so, yeah, I think that's why I want to make this video, is a lot of this was being misreported, and I just want people to be misinformed, because I've literally seen people for days now make these fucking posts, and I'm like, why are you still posting shit from an article that's mostly been disproven? And that's the main problem we're having. And I think it also people wanting, oh my god, my camera fell over. Sorry about that. I think it's also just people wanting to talk about how Marvel's fucking failing. It's the end of the world, and Marvel's dying or whatever. And I really don't think that's it. This year, Spider-Verse is in the top 10 highest grossing films this year. Guardians of the Galaxy's highest grossing films this year. I think Ant-Man might still be on the list. It might have gone lower off the list. Could be wrong about that. But, like, I think when it's all said and done, there's still movies that are in the list of highest grossing films this year. Do I think that superhero movies are maybe slowing down? Absolutely. I don't. The thing is, I don't think there's any genre that's not been popular and just kind of died out. People always talk about westerns, but I think westerns got to a point where they were played out, and us and people slowed down at making them. Every once in a while, we'll still get a western. Also, I think with westerns they're a little bit different. Where westerns evolved into like we have space westerns like Star Wars and things like that, and we have other things like that that I think that have kind of kept westerns going in a sense, where we still have that kind of storytelling. It's different now. It's kind of evolved a little bit. So that's why I feel about that. I think people are just really weird about Marvel like dying. I don't think it's dying. But I will say DC's got a good upper hand right now because DC, is rebooting itself. Marvel's having a hard time. If they come out swinging, that'd be great. But I almost feel like maybe DC missed their chance a little bit. But we'll see how that goes. But I think the thing to take away is Marvel is changing some things about their TV departments. This came out recently that they are now trying to make continuous shows that go on for multiple seasons instead of just one limited thing, which I think is smart because when they said they were making shows, I thought they actually were making shows and they were being marketed as shows. But then I got to the end of the WandaVision, I'm like, oh, this is just a one season thing? Like, couldn't you guys have just fucking told people that? Like, it's just, there's a lot of stuff like that bugged me about how they did the whole TV division, and they're working on that. I think they've also been talking about how they're going to cut back on certain projects and things like that. They've canceled some projects. So I think Marvel is listening to the critics, but I also think people need to shut the fuck up with this Marvel dying shit. Are they slowing down? Yes. But I think all of Hollywood is slowing down a little bit because they're kind of a weird spot right now with streaming all this shit. And I think that Marvel is going to be fine because, let's be real, they come out with another fucking Avengers movie tomorrow, we're all gonna go sit our ass down and buy fucking tickets. Like, that's the thing I don't get. I think what you might see is there might be more hit or miss movies where, like, movies that do okay, movies that do kind of and then movies that do great or pretty good. That's what you're gonna see. And I think it might be the same with DC, I don't think any of them were bomb necessarily. So I think that's kind of what we're going with Marvel. Just want to make this video kind of talking about the Marvel news. I think it's all really shitty the way people have been talking about it. It's been fucking crazy.